Good Friday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Jesse Simonton, Rob Lewis, and Austin Price. Brent Hubbs, glad to have you along with us on this Friday. Tennessee, Mississippi State tomorrow at noon for the Volunteers. Lots of questions continue. There's certainly hope with the play of the quarterback position. But I think, Jesse, and all you guys, it starts up front. What's Tennessee's offensive line going to look like? Riley Locklear listed as a game-time decision. I think we would all be surprised if Riley Locklear plays on tomorrow. Given the fact he hadn't done anything on the practice field. So if he cannot go, what's Tennessee's answer at right guard?
Well, obviously, I mean, Jeremy Pruitt has not made it a secret that he really likes the upside of Chris Akperogene. Well, how does he say it, AP?
Akperigny.
Chris Akperigny's pretty good.
But Chris played 10 snaps on Saturday, and even when when Riley Locklear went out, the first guy that went in was Ryan Johnson, and so. Does Tennessee start three freshmen? I'm a bit skeptical. I would not be surprised if Chris does play, more as like a number two or a backup guy. Doesn't just get the 10 snaps he got at the end of the Georgia game.
He just got into practice a few weeks ago. I mean, he missed all spring and
but the question
all
is,
fall camp.
When you look at him, what are their other options at right guard? Jerome Carvin's, he's MIA at this point. He's on the practice field. But
he's not even Carvin is not even at this point with the twos.
Right.
I mean, Ollie Lane and Jackson Lampley, and Lampley played like 15, the last 12 snaps or whatever Saturday. Ollie Lane got 10 snaps. Carvin didn't. Right. I mean, he is clearly for whatever reason, has been buried behind those guys. So, yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of options because it's not like they're going to bump in Marcus Tatum there.
And they're not going to. I don't think they're going to flip Trey to right to play Jameer Johnson at left, and Jameer Johnson's never repped at right.
And they're not going to put. Calvert. It doesn't seem like they're going to move Calvert inside. It seems
and they're not going to slide Darnell back inside.
Yeah,
which kind of limits what your options are. Ryan Johnson makes the most sense with the most experience, but. Austin, do you think it'll end up being right guard by committee on Saturday?
By committee, I agree with that. I just have a tough time seeing, Akperogene being he may play, but the upside is obviously there with him. They feel like the upside's there, but the floor is pretty far down there on if he misses assignment. Again, he missed all the spring, missed all the fall camp. He's had a hamstring flare up on him for so long. I just have a tough time seeing him getting a few weeks of practice and, a couple of snaps against Georgia there with 4 minutes to go, and then all of a sudden, let's throw him out there.
And also, don't you think that no matter what we see him doing games, and Ryan Johnson's a great kid, I'm not trying to denigrate him, but I just think Will Friend's comfortable with him because he knows what to do, even if he can't physically do it all the time.
I'm skeptical of anything we see at practice. That's just me. I don't, you guys may feel differently. I'm skeptical of go back to the Florida game. Ollie Lane was running with the twos. He didn't even travel. You know what I'm saying? Right. I just think they just.
Well, in the individual period, which is what we see, it looks one way and it may end up being totally different. I think it's pretty clear. To me, it was anyway on Wednesday at the practice field. It was Ryan Johnson needs some reps. It's a backup center. In case something happens to Brandon Kennedy. And by giving him some of those individual reps in the individual period, it meant Chris Akperogene got a bunch more reps at right guard to try to speed him up. Not that he's going to start, but
if they had to turn to him, they don't want it to be a disaster.
Right. Chris can't get enough reps right now because he's missed so many, as you mentioned. So I think that's a little bit of that. Ryan Johnson makes the most sense because for what Rob's mentioned, that's where your biggest comfort level is right now because he's played so many snaps. He's played in the SEC,
and he was the first guy they went to when Locklear went down.
Right, but
if we have to go by what we've seen in recent history. That's what they did on Saturday.
Right, that's where they would go, and I don't think they want to upset the left side of the line either because I think that side is starting to get a little continuity with Wanye and Trey Smith, and Wanye spoke about it this week. Rob, he feels pretty comfortable with how much Trey's helping him. They're starting to develop.
I think Wanye's obviously getting better.
I think he is too. He didn't have his best game against Georgia, but I think he's getting better.
I'm not saying he's a top-shelf SEC lineman yet, but he's made tangible progress in the last month and a half.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Jesse brings up the best point about the tangible proof at Florida. When K-Ron went out, the natural indication would have been leave Darnell at guard and bring in Marcus Tatum. But their natural inclination was bump Darnell at the tackle bring in Riley Locklear. Well, that's because that's the next combination. That was going to be the next combination they went to. The other day, Ryan Johnson comes in. Maybe that's the next combination they go to.
Yeah, makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Well, this is what you hear coaches say this stuff all the time, and they say whether they say in the preseason or even down through week 6, when you line up, whether it's at offensive line, defensive line, whatever, but it pertains to the offensive line. You don't want to be playing if your backup right tackle is your 10th offensive lineman. You don't want that guy to be number 7 when you have to bring somebody in. You want to have so that's why.
That's why you cross-train
exactly.
so many people, and why you do some of the. I think Tennessee, we all agree, took it too far
100%.
this preseason.
100%.
But that's why you cross-train guys to make sure you're pecking order of your top 7. So if this guy's out at guard, here's how we adjust to get our next best lineman on the field, whether it's a tackle or a guard or a center or whatever the case may be. So, again, change likely coming to that position because I don't think any of us feel like Locklear is going to be ready to go or be 100%, even though he's listed as a game-time decision. Let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. I asked this question on Monday or Tuesday in the podcast. I'll ask this question as we end the week. What do we expect out of Brian Maurer after a second week of practice with him as the full-time number 1 guy and Jim Chaney with a week to build a game plan with him? What's the next step with him? I know, and Rob, you make a great point. Don't take it too far, but there's a progression. What do we think the next progression for him is?
Well, I mean, if I'm Tennessee, the number one thing I'm doing is I'm watching the Auburn film and saying, what did the Tigers do to put so much stress on Mississippi State's defense that then allowed their freshman quarterback, who has struggled elsewhere in every other game? Bo Nix had to throw at the end of the Oregon game, but in every other game, Bo Nix has struggled to complete passes. But against Mississippi State, he threw for 300 yards and looked like a 5-star quarterback. So if I'm Jim Chaney, I'm saying, what did they do, and can we do some of those things to be successful? Now, we've talked about it on the Rocky Top Roundtable. A lot of what Auburn did early in that game was go wide. They went Schwartz on a reverse. They ran a little backside jet sweep to another guy. Can Tennessee do some of that stuff to not only kind of help out their quarterback, but also try to generate some creative ways to get some yards in the run game?
Are you surprised that Tennessee's not done more of
based on
that?
watching from what Chaney was doing at Georgia? Absolutely.
I mean, look, I know they had the 2 tight end set against BYU and pitched it out there and ran it that way. But in terms of the jet sweep, misdirection stuff, we haven't seen a ton of that. They run a couple of those plays, but they haven't run a ton of them.
I saw one on 4th and 1 against BYU.
Right, but you saw one 3 plays earlier. I mean, they ran 2 in that series, but what other ones have they run?
I agree.
Is that the only 2 they've run this year?
Yeah, but back to Maurer, just listening to Jeremy talk after the game and also on this week, I bet one thing they really spent a lot of time with Brian on it is when to hand the ball off in those RPOs. That seemed to be one of Jeremy's. It's something he's come back to a couple times about making the right read in that situation. And I'm not saying that's not really add another wrinkle, but that's something I would expect to see a little bit more of this week.
Jesse, you think he missed some in watching the review? Do you think he missed some RPO, some run opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was 2 or 3. I didn't think they obviously see with the all-22, it's much easier to see than what we see with the TV tape because so much of that's predicated on how fast is that safety crashing down.
Right.
Which you can see some of it on the TV. But it's much easier when you have the all-22 looking from the end zone. I mean, I thought, basically their offensive line also just started to, Wanya was much better in the first half, and the second half was when Ojulari and some of the guys started getting after him. Nolan Smith started getting after Darnell on the other side. And so naturally a freshman quarterback started to feel pressure, and his decision-making waned. And that's to be expected, first career start. I mean, the thing is that they're going to continue to call those RPO plays because those are the most successful plays that they had outside of the Callaway touchdown. Yeah. I mean, the slant to Jennings, he hit that quick read to Jennings in the second drive, which was a great throw. One of the only passes the only pass that Dominic Wood Anderson caught was an RPO. He pulled it out and hit Wood Anderson for like a 15-yard out. So I just do think that's going to be their passing game.
Well, it should be. I mean, that's because that looks like that's where Maurer's most comfortable anyway. But you're going to have to give it some. You're going to have to run some out of that for guys to respect it. I think Georgia, because it was a 15-point lead, Austin in the second half, I don't think they gave much respect to the RPO. I mean, I think they were just like, hey, he's throwing it. So we're going to blitz.
And if he does run it, who cares?
Yeah, if he runs it and we give up 4 yards at the end of the day, we're not really worried about it.
Or if they give it 15, they're not really worried.
Right, not with that kind of lead that they got.
I mean, and this week, when we were out there again, I always think there's a method to what we see out there versus what they're actually going to do. But when we were out there, they were working, quite a bit. The tight ends were on, slow releases and then, kind of a double move. And so, I mean, you have to wonder, like, do they work that where that you fake the short stuff and then try to get upfield, in the seam.
And the Jim Chaney chunk that thing method, which he certainly loves to play in his passing game.
Yeah, and that will be an interesting. Maurer completed 50% of his passes, and he attempted, I think he was 2 of 8 for throws over 20 yards. I mean, the completion percentage there is never going to be particularly high, but you would like to see a little bit higher of a hit rate there. They hit the one to Callaway, but otherwise it was kind of a struggle.
They hit the one to Jennings there in the second half, right before Maurer took the massive hit and fumbled.
Yeah, the one when Jennings one-handed it and the guy fell down. Yeah.
Cheney likes that window if he can get the zone too. He likes that deep out corner post or whatever you want to call it. He likes throwing the ball into that kind of that hole shot there.
Wasn't that a throw Crompton threw a lot?
Yeah, Cheney's always thrown that pass. He's always that's a little bit of an old Spurrier play that Tennessee fans bang their head against the wall for a decade with because it seemed like it was always open. But he likes that. He likes that hole shot behind the corner in front of the safety to the bound or to the sideline on that cut there if he can get it. Because let's talk about this Mississippi State defense. Rob and Jesse, Austin, all of you jump in. I know, Rob, you had the matchup piece. When you look at the State defense, pretty good against Kentucky, bad against Auburn for sure. They've had the suspensions. What do we know about this Mississippi State defense?
I mean, they're a lot. Jesse's talked about it a lot this week. They're a lot better depending on what they're doing with the suspensions. Whether or not. I mean, do we know? It sounds like Gay's probably going to play this week. They'll have the safety as they mix and match all that. I mean, they were terrible against Auburn. I don't know that would have looked a lot different no matter what guys they play. They've had a hard time stopping the run. They're almost as bad. I mean, they're really just as right there with Tennessee. If you look at the SEC rankings, they're not a lot better against the pass. And what jumps out about in the passing defense is they're giving up over 8 yards an attempt, which is next to last in the league. So they are susceptible to the big play.
Which would make sense with Chaney wanting to chunk it. They give up run yards, but can Tennessee run it against them?
Yeah, everybody else has.
They try to run it against them, Jesse.
I think you have to, right?
But I mean, this is
But they have, obviously that's what we've been saying about
right.
Tennessee for a couple weeks. Help out the quarterback.
But I mean, this will be it's a little bit skewed because Georgia and Florida I think are really salty on defense, and Mississippi State's not in that class. But Tennessee they played 2 SEC games. They're averaging 2.8 yards per carry. I mean that's sorry. I don't care who you're playing.
I agree. I mean, again, it's the same
Same message.
Same message. Rob's right. Mississippi State not as good, but they still got some guys. I mean, it's not like they're rolling out there with a trash defense. So, I mean, like Tennessee will have to. I think just more than anything, just commit to it. Find ways. To be creative in the run game. And I think you still have to see more Eric Gray. I know you mentioned on the Rocky Top Roundtable, Tim. You thought Tim Jordan did some good things, especially in pass protection. I don't disagree with that. Maybe you just have to be that deliberate, where when 9 comes in, he's more of the pass blocker than he is a run threat.
I thought they pretty much were until that last drive of the game. I mean, I didn't think when he played. I think I certainly felt like it was going to be a passing play whenever Jordan came in the first 3 quarters. But point taken. I just think you got to try to run it a little bit more. You got to try to have a little bit more balance. Help yourself out there.
I mean, Mississippi State, to show you how little Tennessee's running. Mississippi State's running back has as many yards after contact as Ty Chandler has all season, and Ty is Tennessee's leading rusher with 320 yards total.
Yeah,
and you toss in Schrader, the quarterback. They've got two of the top ground gainers in the top 8 ground gainers in the SEC.
Does it feel like State and Tennessee are a little bit parallel right now? I mean, you got a second-year coach. in Moorhead down there. You got a second-year coach in Jeremy Pruitt. I think we'd all agree that Moorhead inherited probably better talent overall. Certainly a more experienced team for year one, but they've got a freshman quarterback. They've got some holes they're trying to fill on defense and trying to figure a way to. I mean, does it feel like they're a little bit similar, or I don't want to say mirror, but a little bit similar to each other in terms of trying to build things? Although State was more stable when Moorhead got there than when Pruitt got to Tennessee.
Yeah, because they had 3 guys go in the first round this past draft. But I think both of them are kind of dealing with outside noise too. There's been rumors about Moorhead and Rutgers, and perhaps that they're a guy if they go for a sitting head coach, he's someone because he has these Northeast ties.
I'll tell you where I heard him to this week is if Narduzzi leaves Pitt, he'll push hard for the Pitt job, which would make some sense for Moorhead too. So if that starts to service, that's going to continue. But go ahead.
Yeah, and so when you talk about that, you talk about these kind of juggling these suspensions. They lost a tight one to Kansas State. That was one that they probably didn't expect to, similar to Tennessee and BYU. I don't know about where the two programs are at, but this season in particular, they seem to be kind of mirroring. And that's why this is such a big game that AP has said. AP said at the beginning of the season, but now it's taking on an even larger, just because if Tennessee loses this game, it's hard to start picking out the wins.
When you start to wonder about how this team, does everybody kind of keep holding together? Look, your crowd Saturday night against Georgia was really good. Hats off to that fan base.
And I think it'll be good again at noon on Saturday.
I think it'll be solid.
It's not going to be full, but
night games versus a day game. Yeah.
For a noon game, I think for a game Tennessee fans feel like they can, walk away happy from. They're going to show up.
And you got
win this week, then. Yeah. They're holding on like there's no tomorrow for Brian Maurer.
Yeah, but so this is one that it's gettable. It's not a lay down, it's not an automatic, but it's a gettable, winnable game for Tennessee if they go out and play and execute and get done what they need to get done. We've talked a lot about the offense. We've talked about Mississippi State's defense, what they do. What's Tennessee's defense? Look, at this point, you are who you are, and who you are is you can't rush the quarterback with any kind of consistency. So what's your answer to that notion in trying to play defense? Because, again, it's not a shot at Jeremy Pruitt. You just can't play defense the way he wants to play defense with this unit right now. So what's the adjustment? Is it bend, don't break, give up yards, force field goals, kind of play it like an NFL defense, Rob, where you let a team drive it and then you get real serious about, getting aggressive and trying to get a stop once a team crosses midfield or gets to the 40-yard line? How do you play it if you're Jeremy Pruitt, knowing who you are now?
I think you almost have to, because you just don't want to. You're not seeing anything from the secondary that makes you feel good about taking a lot of chances. I don't think. I think that's a good idea. You're doing an awful job generating negative plays. They had two tackles for loss against Georgia and 70 offensive snaps. That's not good. You're looking at a lot of if you get them to third down, it's 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and it's hard to play defense that way. But by the flip side, if you're Jeremy Pruitt, you got to feel nervous about rushing 6 or 7 and leave it. You've not got good safety play. Your cornerbacks have been up and down at best. So I think that, to me, I don't think that's a bad option at all, to try and make people go the long way, and then maybe get a little elaborate inside the 20 when the field shrinks.
Yeah, I think the field shrinking, it plays into Tennessee's hands. I think you bring up a great point of playing it like an NFL team does. Let them move it between the 20s, and then, hope when there's less field to cover, you're able to, I guess your deficiencies are masked a little bit, which there are many on the defensive side.
The problem with the bend but don't break is that I think, to me, this defense and where the depth is, it's going to eventually break, in my opinion. We've seen it week in and week out. They just don't have the depth to withstand. So I think they're going to have to force turnovers. They're going to have to get aggressive. And I think that's, we saw them doing some creative stuff out at practice on Wednesday. It's going. They're going to have to. But Rob talked about the lack of TFLs. That's what they're going to have to continue to kind of do. I think they're going to have to actually gamble a little bit and take some pressure, because if you allow Hill and Schrader and these guys just to continue to eat yards, suddenly that puts even more pressure on a freshman quarterback to respond with some of these drives. But conversely, I mean, how many snaps can Toa and Batuli withstand, And that's kind of the flip side of just letting a team kind of march down the field slowly and then saying, all right, we'll get a stop in the red zone.
And it's magnified by the fact that Tennessee can't run the ball well enough to give its defense a rest.
Exactly.
I think this is a great point. I'm a big fan of Mike Lombardi. I don't know if you got in his podcast, former Patriots general manager, and he has a great quote that he says all the time. It's like, the best way to play defense is to play less of it. Play 25 minutes of defense instead of 35 minutes of defense, and that's what Tennessee's not been able to do.
Well, Georgia had a third down snap 1 every 7 snaps in the first half. They were only in 42 offensive snaps in the first half. I think they were in six third down plays.
Yeah, and 2 of those field goals that they got was because Georgia self-inflicted with penalties themselves.
And just look. In 2 SEC games, again, Georgia and Florida are really good, but still, they held the ball. Georgia held it for 36 and a half minutes. Florida held it for 35 and a half minutes. It's gonna be, that's just it's going to wear you. And Tennessee's depth is not good anyway. Even if you have good depth, it's hard to win that way.
Do we see Crouch at inside linebacker this week?
I think for sure.
Yeah, I think it's more
minimally.
Yeah, I think there you go. He spells some guys to give him a few plays off, but mostly plays outside.
I tend to think he's going to play more inside, just because I just think he's going to have a hard time as an outside guy against the zone read stuff. I think that's hard for him to find the football outside, because I don't think that's second nature to him at this point. I think when you look at him, he's still struggling some in space.
So you think that they go DeAndre Johnson there, because they're not going to go Roman Harrison, or is that a Bennett deal?
Well, I think
you're going to see Kevon Bennett play a little bit more, just based on practice.
I think you may stay in nickel a whole bunch, and then kind of scheme around it that way a little bit, the way they did it at times on Saturday. So I don't know. Maybe he plays out there. I just think that's a real challenge for whoever. I would throw Darrell Taylor in this, because I don't think Taylor's playing well. I think it's a real challenge for those guys in space right now, particularly in the run game, to maintain the discipline, to take the outside stuff away. They've not played a ton of zone read stuff yet. They haven't faced that a whole lot. I think that's going to be a real challenge for this defense this week to find the football. Georgia State didn't run it a lot, but they did enough RPO stuff, and the quarterback was timely when he kept the ball and was effective when he kept it on the zone read. Mississippi State's committed to doing that. They want their quarterback to run it 10, 12, 13 times a game. Tennessee's not faced that. I think that's a heck of a challenge for Tennessee's defense, given the way they played in space against the run to this point.
Yeah, because even the Mormon Manziel, he was not a zone read. He was more of just kind of a playground, running around. He'd break you down within the context of a pass play, not a lot of QB sweeps and design runs.
Right, not a lot of designs. This is the first team that they played that's really going to call a design run and really get after it that way. So I think that and tackling is Tennessee's biggest challenge this week. Finding the football in open space and knocking the running back backwards instead of getting drugged 3 or 4 yards is Tennessee's biggest challenge when you look at this matchup and trying to slow down Mississippi State's offense. They didn't miss tackles. You talked about this on the round table. Their numbers of missed tackles weren't bad, but they didn't tackle anybody going their direction. They were getting drugged to the ground, 2, 3 yards after, 4 yards after contact, and I think that's got to be a major concern for Pruitt now and obviously moving forward for the rest of the season as well. Plenty of stuff in this matchup that's intriguing. 2 pretty even teams, even though I think the point spread's a little bit higher than all of us thought it would be. They feel like they're pretty evenly matched with a lot of question marks and some similarities coming into this game. Quickly on recruiting, Tennessee had the big weekend. We talked about that on the podcast on Tuesday. This weekend seems to be a bit of a light recruiting weekend, but some notables coming in.
Well, Tennessee hopes to get Harrison Bailey up. They hope to get Keyshawn Lawrence in. Elijah Howard will come in, the 2021 commit. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. The numbers will be less. I'll be interested to see where Tyler Barron goes this weekend. Does he come over? Same thing with Jay Hardy. And then, of course, Cooper will be here. So, you know.
I think, how big is it if they can get Lawrence and Bailey here? And look, I know those guys may take visits if this thing doesn't go any better for Tennessee. I mean, I don't think they're the only commitments in that deal, but how important is it for them to see tangible proof with their own eyes in the house? How big of a deal is it if they can get them here?
I think it's important, especially Keyshawn. You know, I think he's going to have more options than Harrison Bailey is. That's not a knock on Harrison, but, you know.
So many quarterbacks are off the board.
Yeah, quarterbacks are off the
Everybody's
board, and you only take so many. So, you know, in my mind, it's bigger if Keyshawn gets in here. And, you know, I mean, again, I think it's important if you can get Tyler Barron, Jay Hardy in, and Brent. I can't overstate enough how much they need to win. I mean, you know, like, you don't win this one, you're 1-5. You're playing Bama, that's 1-6. At that point, Katie barred the door because the psyche, I guess where the team's at mentally could just be totally shot.
And from a recruiting standpoint, you're back to selling only some sort of hope for the future. Whereas you could sell, Jesse, coming out of this past game, hey, we're there, we just don't have enough of you. Okay, we're there in the first half, we just ran out of gas. Whether that's true or not, that's a sell that you can make. You got to back that up though this week with something, don't you think?
Yeah, and I mean, and Tennessee's also, you know, they're kind of right, AP. They're trying to hold on. I mean, with guys like, I mean, Jay Hardy, I think they're in a good spot for, but you know, he's starting to flirt with Auburn. Obviously, Chris Morris, they're back in the middle of it, but they're back in the middle of that, but can they survive this weekend to Texas A&M? And so a win Saturday, I think, again, kind of pushes you. It halts any sort of momentum kind of elsewhere.
Be interesting to see what happens on the recruiting front. Basketball, obviously, P.J. Hall is in. We talked about that.
I'm sorry, it's next weekend.
Oh, it's next
I
weekend.
misspoke on Monday.
Okay, so he's not coming in this weekend. He's coming in
the 18th.
Next week for the Alabama game. He'll be in town. So no basketball in of note this weekend.
He's coming in on a weekend where there's no home game.
Yeah, how about that?
Interesting.
And he'll be in.
I think it also I think Jaden Springer was out of that stadium about first quarter on Saturday.
I know.
Will there be any of those committee guys come up here while he's up here? Somebody asked that.
I don't
Doesn't
think so.
feel like it, right?
I mean, Corey Walker's definitely not coming back from Central Virginia. Keon may pop in, but I doubt it. I mean, with no home game and they'll be starting their own practices.
Right. So it'll be all PJ.
I think it'll be all PJ.
It'll be all PJ. But that's a week from now. That's not coming up this weekend. So we'll have plenty of basketball.
I need to clean one thing up. I meant to mention this in the war room last week, and I forgot. Tennessee had a very big underclassman visit as well last weekend. Jaden Bradley, big-time point guard, plays at a private school over in Charlotte, plays with Bobby Mays. I mean, he's a top 10 national recruit in 2022. He's a youngster, but one that Vol fans should keep an eye on.
Well, that's important to get him in early because we know in basketball recruiting it's a multi-year process with those guys for sure. So some basketball, a nugget there to close out the podcast. We'll have full basketball coverage for you coming up later today. It's Basketball Media Day. Rick Barnes meeting the media, so we'll have full coverage of that, and we'll have full coverage of Tennessee and Mississippi State on Saturday. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast. For Rob Lewis, Jesse Simonton, and Austin Price, I'm Brett Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend, everybody.